Alright, so this is going to take approximately 38 minutes to cut this rose flower. I'm hoping that my camera can last that long and has enough memory to capture the whole thing and then do a speed through on it for you. Alright, here we go. We're going to push the magic button. And off she goes. Now, in order to get this out with all these pieces falling all over the place inside, what I do is I get my roll of regular painter's tape. This is just inside house painter tape, that blue painting tape, 3M. And then I just take lengths of it that are about the length of the sheet that I'm going to pull out. And then I go ahead and put that over the top, like that. And I push it down gently. And then we're just going to do the whole thing that way. And that way I don't have all those little pieces falling all over the place. And then this comes out real nice and easy then. Alright, so now we're going to go outside and we're going to go get the other acrylics that I put out there because they get really smelly. So we're going to go get those now. Shit. Here we go. As long as we don't lose any pieces, we're good. First, we're going to peel off all of these little things. We're going to try and peel off all the little betweener sections here. Just going to get rid of all the tapes.
Now that we have removed the adhesive with our fingers, we're going to go ahead and get a metal spoon and remove the adhesive from the rest of the pieces.
And push up from underneath, hit at that corner. Make the spoon do the work here. There we go. Yeah, that works. Ha! Wearing that one. There we go.
Tape the completed side. Then flip over and repeat on the other side. Step number 2, copper foil plexiglass like stained glass. Here's some recommended copper foil tape sizes for you. You will need your bone folder and your copper foil.
So to foil this, I will be using the Studio Pro, just their basic 0.56 centimeters or 7/32 of an inch copper foil. I really like this because it is one of the thinnest foils that I've seen. Some of them are wider width. This one, I like it, like I said, because it's thinner. And with these littler pieces, it will give more landscape on the surface. This is a bone folder, and we'll be using that to smooth the copper edging onto the edges of the pieces that I'm going to pull out. And then I'm going to actually put them back in there. I'm trying something a little different today. So this is a spool of the copper foil that I already have open. And this will be fitted onto the edges of the pieces. And I'm going to show you that. And then I'm going to do a corner down here. And then I'm going to put the pieces back in as I go along. I'm going to work this in sections until we get all the way up to the top and everything's foiled and inserted back in here. And then we're going to push the pattern through onto the tape, and then it'll be ready to solder together.
Copper foiling up close. Ideally, start foiling on an inside edge. That means if you're doing an outer border piece, start foiling on the inside edge for a sturdier finished artwork. Use the sticky side of the foil on the plexiglass edges. Center your copper foil on the plexiglass edges. That way you have even edging hanging off the sides. Rub gently and quickly the copper foil in inner arcs to heat the foil. This prevents tearing in deep arcs. Finger fold the foil overhang by firmly finger rubbing and pressing the copper foil down onto the plexiglass faces. Finger fold the corners, kind of like a Christmas present with wrapping paper, creating those nice little creased edges. Overlap the foil start point with about 1 centimeter or less of the end foil point, then cut the copper foil with scissors. Finger smooth all the edges on the foiled plexiglass piece. Next, use your bone folder to rub, press, and smooth foil on all edges and faces of the plexiglass. This creates a nice, solid, and smooth finish. Be sure to press down any foil corner points that stick up. Then just set it down on your surface and smooth out all those little wrinkles to create a beautifully finished copper foiled piece. Then you're just going to repeat that copper foil process for all the other pieces in your kit. Enjoy! Next, you're going to replace the copper foiled pieces back into the plexiglass form. Peel up the blue tape on sections you are working on. Remove the pieces from the pattern sections and copper foil them. Replace foiled pieces back into the pattern. Tape the completed section to hold the foiled pieces in place before starting a new section. As you can see, they kind of fall out if you don't have them taped into place. Complete your foiling and replacing all the pieces in your plexiglass kit. I recommend using a fresh layer of painter's tape for a smoother finish than what I have here. Now it's time to press that pattern out of the plexiglass puzzle frame. It will stick to the tape.
Now we have finished doing the foiling of all the pieces and covered it over with the painter's tape. Now we're going to flip it over. We can see that all the pieces have been foiled. What we're going to do is we're going to gently push through all these pieces, and actually what we're going to do, because I cut out this outer section that I really didn't need to do that, and it won't be that way on the kits that I sell. I'm just going to leave it all attached. But next we're going to be pushing through all these pieces onto the tape. So this is going to take a little bit of work, but we'll get there. Because these pieces were a bit more snug than what I kind of anticipated for them, but they'll all push through, and it doesn't really matter if this part, if these little little divider sections, I should say, if they get broken. So long as the pieces come through in the positions they need to be in, then you're good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my bone folder to help push through some of these pieces, because some of them are snug. We are dealing with some sturdy tape. We're just going to keep on doing this and pulling it up. And as you can see, this gives everything a nice, beautiful, perfect spacing. And that's why I squish them into these little spaces like I do. And we're just going to work our way through the whole project here to get all these pieces onto the tape, because next we're going to solder it. And this is just a real nice, easy way of getting all the pieces in the right spots very easily with just beautiful, beautiful spacing. And that's one of the things I really like about this.
Now that we have pressed our pattern out, we are ready to flux and solder. Flux all joints.
For this piece, I am going back to using leaded solder because it flows so much nicer than the lead-free solder. So I like these way better, and that's what I'm going to use this time around, along with our handy dandy flux on all the joints. And then of course we will be doing soldering with the hot iron and have our Salamoniac thing to clean off all the junk, and of course our handy dandy standy right there with a little sponge in there. So let's get to it.
Pour the flux liquid into the flux cap. This is just an easy way for applying the flux. I recommend using vinyl gloves because the flux is really sticky. Flux all your corner joints. The solder, it needs the flux in order to stick to the copper foil. Without it, it'll just kind of bead up on top of the foil and it won't actually stick to it. Liberally apply flux. It will be washed off later. You don't need to worry about if the solder is going to stick to your painter's tape, because it doesn't. It's a really nice feature of the painter's tape. We are now ready to solder tack the front side of the pattern at all the joints. Unwind the length of solder that you need to use. Leave it attached to the spool. You don't need to cut it. The sponge with the water and the sal ammoniac block are used to clean the buildup off of the iron, and they also help slightly cool a very hot iron. Solder tack all your flux joints. To solder tack, you will gently touch the hot tip of the iron to the solder, and that will melt off little dollops. If you have solder that's not sticking to a joint, it's likely that you forgot to put some flux on that spot, like I did on this one. So just go ahead and add the flux in afterwards, and it will make the solder stick to that joint. You'll then go back and add another dollop of solder. Once all of the joints are soldered, it's optional to remove the blue tape for the full soldering. I discovered leaving the blue tape on is actually better and keeps the solder from falling through the back and making blobs. It also makes soldering faster and easier. So try it with the blue tape still left on there. And solder the whole front side or back side. It really doesn't matter which side you want to start with. Just make sure that when you solder it, you solder both sides so that they match with their amount of solder. You want the solder on the back as well to be as thick as the solder on the front, because then when you paint it, it keeps all the paint inside of that. Step number 7, solder the rest of the front side joint tracks. Again, you will need to flux all the front side before you can solder in order for the solder to stick. Once you've fluxed all the tracks, then you're ready to begin soldering. And then you're going to solder all the front side joint tracks. And you want to try and give it a nice, even little domed ridge on all of the soldering job that you do. So sometimes you have to kind of reheat spots and do a little bit of extra work to kind of get things to match up correctly, but that's pretty normal. With this particular soldering line, it's a good example of how the solder falls through to the backside because I didn't have the blue painter's tape on there. Because sometimes, even though these gaps are very narrow, as you can see, it is enough when the solder is really hot that it'll fall through to the backside and it'll create those blobs. But I found when I left the blue painter's tape on there, it prevented it from doing that, and I got really nice ridges, and it was very effective that way. So I highly recommend that you keep the blue painter's tape on while you solder the entire front side of your project. I think you'll be really pleased with the results. Once you've completed soldering the front side of your project, you're welcome to go ahead and solder along the outside edges as well, or you can wait until the very end of the project after you've also soldered the back side. Once you have completed the front side, you're going to go ahead and flip over and remove the blue tape from the back if you used it and solder the back side. Once again, make sure that when you solder the back side, you do it as full and as rounded as the front side, because this will hold the paint in place. Once you have completed soldering your project, we're going to go ahead and wash the project. We're going to use dish soap, warm water, and a non-abrasive sponge. This is one of the best ways I've found to clean plexiglass. Definitely do not use rubbing alcohol on plexiglass. It will actually weaken the material composition of the plexiglass. So just use a regular type of a soft dish soap and warm water and a sponge, and that will clean your plexiglass off really nice. When you've finished washing your plexiglass, then you're just going to grab your paper towels and you're going to pat your artwork dry. Now that our project is soldered and cleaned, we are ready to add the clear faux texture to the front side. To texturize my completed project, I like to use Master's Touch, the clear gloss gel. This creates a nice stained glass effect. I also use a variety of tools to texturize with. I highly recommend getting this stained glass painting book by Julie. I'm not sure about how to say her last name, so I'm not going to try, but I highly recommend getting the book. It's where I actually learned the texturizing techniques that I'm showing you here. Make sure that your gloss gel texture will fill the entire shape area and that you touch the solder edges for a proper stained glass effect. I recommend using an angled brush for easier gel application. It just makes it kind of easier to get the gel to the edges of the solder, and make sure that you keep your gel texture kind of thin because that will ensure that your gel dries clear. I found it is true that if you put it on a little too thick, sometimes it can be a milkier white, so you want to make sure that you apply your gel somewhat thin, or as thin as you can possibly go with the texture still being there, and that will give it that nice clear textured stained glass look. If you get some of the gel in places that you don't want it to be, such as on top of the solder, don't worry, just wipe it off with your finger. You can get a little paper towel piece, you can use a Q-tip. Any of those items will work. Anything that makes you happy, feel free to go ahead and use that, but it's really easy to wipe off the wet gel from the solder. As you can see, the gel is creating a really nice texturized glass type look on our plexiglass project. I highly recommend that you try exploring different texturizing tools and see what you can come up with. Here's a tip that I discovered. Use a black sheet of paper or something else dark underneath your project and you will be able to see the texture a lot better. So give it a go. Here I'm applying a different technique to create a different kind of a texture effect on my stained glass piece. The other one, you notice I have it a little more texture and I wound up doing kind of like a dot 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 pat into it with the bristles of the brush. In this one, I'm creating more of a swirl pattern to give a different kind of a stained glass effect and to make the flower stand out from the other background elements. If you make a mistake while you're painting with the gel, and maybe you fill in a spot and you're like, I don't really like that, don't worry about it. It's really easy to wipe it out. You can use a little bit of water on a paper towel, and you can just go ahead and take that and then wipe off the spots that you say, hey, I don't really like that. And then you can go ahead and paint in the areas that you do like and want. Once the texturizing is complete and dry, then we are ready to start with the color part, and we're going to paint with PBO Vitrail paints on the back side. For the PBO Vitrail paints, I'm going to be demonstrating on the owl. I chose to demonstrate on the owl because I have the proper thickness on the solder, and I didn't actually do that with the roses. So I've decided to show you an example of how the paint stays in the solder when you have a nice thick solder type line work.
Okay, time to flip it over, and I'm going to go ahead and paint the back side. For this portion, I'm going to take out the black paper and just put, since my table has a lot of stuff caked on it, put down a white paper towel, and now I have it flipped onto the back side, and just going to go ahead and paint that now. So we're going to use the PBO Vitrail paints, and since I am painting from the back side to be seen through the front side, I have to do my highlights first so that they will be underneath my darker colors if I want to. I'm probably not going to do too many highlights. I'm going to do the couple of little white dots on the eyes and let those dry, and then I will fill it in with the black. And that's pretty much might be the extent of my highlights. The rest I'm probably just going to keep single colors. So I'm going to pick as my light source this as being essentially the light source, and so I will have the light. I'm going to actually do some highlights on, this side, and it will be in terms of as if this were the light source shining onto things.
Once the highlights are done and the paint is dry, we are ready for the color PBO Vitrail paints.
Okay, so this has now had a chance to dry overnight, although it doesn't really need that long, but I let it dry overnight. So now we're just going to look at it from the front side. You can see the cool texturing, how it looks very glass-like, like a nice cool textured glass. And then you can see the white highlights from the back side. I'm kind of curious, because I've never done this before, if these will wind up looking like the color that goes behind them some. So that'll be fun to see. So anyways, now we are ready to paint the rest of the owl and the patterning behind him. Let's do it. So some of these I have not opened for a little while, so they're a little hard to open, these jars. This is a jar opener. I love this. It's one of the best tools you can get for paints and all sorts of stuff that are tough. So there you go. I recommend getting a jar opener if you need one.
if needed, to level your artwork, place something under an edge, like I have that little teaspoon type thing underneath my edge. For some of the really small little shape spaces, you're going to go ahead and get a toothpick, and you can use that to dip into your PBO paint and then use the toothpick like a paintbrush and dot in your color into those really small and kind of harder to get at spaces with a paintbrush.
Here's the owl painted from the back side, and then here we flip it over, and this is the front. You can see some of my texturing into the glass here. I think with this I want it to look more like these, so I'm going to retexturize these ones to match more with the more crackly looking stucco glass looking style, because I like that better. But this is basically done, with the exception of we will put on all the chain link and the different rings to hang it. I'm going to fix the texturing on these now, because I really don't like that smooth type thing. It's okay on the wing. I still really like the more chunkier type look to make it really look like that stained glass. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some gloss gel onto these ones and make them look more like these ones.
Now that the paint is dry, we are going on to our last and final step. Number 12, add hanging hardware.
As you can see, the owl is dry now. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the chain link, which is going to be designed to hold it up. And I will nip off a piece of this. I'm just going to need a little section. I'm planning on putting the chain link loop holders, which are these. These ones will attach actually to these here, and these I will have to prepare with flux and solder on them. These are just regular little loops without really, they do have a break to them, but they're largely just a little loop, and that's these guys. 9mm heavy gauge jump ring, and that's going to be the main piece that I will solder onto about here, and then one on the other side, and we'll try and get them about even, and then we'll have this piece that'll go between, and these, oops, not those ones, these are basically like a key ring with how these will loop around and through the other loop. So those will then go through the loop that's soldered on there, and then the chain length, the chain length that we will use will then go between those two, and then it'll be able to hang in a window or whatever like that. And there you have it. So we need a little bit of flux. That's our flux. And we have to prepare the little loops that we're going to attach into the solder. I've heated up the iron, and then we're going to put these about even spacing towards the top. That looks about like it's level there, around about those areas. We're going to put flux on that, our studio safety flux, because we're going to still need the solder to adhere. We're going to pull back out our same solder we had, and we're not going to need very much of it. And we're going to make sure that we get the flux only on the area that we want to attach the ring. And I will also have to put the solder on the ring with the flux. So let's get to it. I'm going to be using just a standard pair of basically beadwork type pliers, and these are really tight little like needle nose, so it makes it easier to work with, especially with these smaller things. Here, let's hold it there. There we go, because it wants to focus farther away. And that we will be holding the ring, because otherwise it will get way too hot to touch it. We will put flux on there, and then we're going to use our trusty iron and put a little solder on it to tin it and get it prepared to attach onto the spot that we put the little bit of flux on. Which I'll just leave that right there so I'll know where I'm going to once it's ready. Do this, I think I'll just dip it in there in the little flux cup. I think that'll be the easiest way to flux it. Stuff's got a little bit of stuff kind of caked on there, but we're just tinning it, and that just prepares it to be attached onto the artwork. Oops. Uh-oh, not like that though. Okay, this thing is rather, okay, that's better. Gotta clean our iron. Okay, so let's do that. We'll get a little more solder on the tip here. And we'll put that on here.
Apply flux liberally to the jump ring till the solder sticks. Flux the jump ring and the spot where you're going to place it on the solder lines. Angle jump ring in your mini needle nose pliers for proper placement on the solder. Solder it into place. Repeat the soldering process to attach the second jump ring on the other side. Allow the solder to sit and cool for about a minute, and then you're going to attach the split ring. I find that using a razor blade is really helpful to get that little split ring open, so I recommend using a razor blade, but of course, be careful. And then also use that with your needle nose pliers, and between the two, it makes a little bit of a challenging task a little bit easier. You'll just attach that onto the jump ring and leave it a little bit of the split ring still open on the jump ring, because that allows for easier chain application. And then when you go to turn it, they can be both turned together at the same time and enter through the split ring loop. Once you have completed attaching the first side of the chain to the split ring loop and jump ring, then you're going to repeat that same process on the other side. And voila! You have a completed plexiglass project ready to hang in your window or on your wall or on a light box. Enjoy! Thank you for watching.